All right, it says we are live. So, welcome everybody to the Lit Author Conversations or Lit Author Lives on the Vuvu Vena channel. Thank you for joining us today. We are joined by Chigozie Obioma, author of The Fisherman, as well as a minority of an orchestra of an orchestra of minorities, and both his books were longlisted for the Man Booker Prize. This is his debut, The Fisherman, and he is a Nigerian author. Welcome to the channel, Chigozie.
Thank you. I'm excited to be doing this kind of stuff with African readers, because I've done quite a lot with people around the world, but very few book clubs, from across Africa. So thank you for doing that.
No, you're most welcome. And it's a pleasure to have you on here. We are very excited about this. The number of people that have engaged with the possibility of this live were very excited, saying that they were very much in love with your book. While we're waiting for more people to come online, these platforms are for the people, and like you're saying, it gives you an opportunity as an African author to engage with African readers, and I think that is so very important. And while we're waiting for everybody else to come on, can we talk about the recent events that occurred in Nigeria, your home country, around the End Sars movement, and can you shed a little bit more light or anything that you are passionate about that movement about with us?
Well, so Nigeria has, as you know, been a very funny country. There's been a lot of injustice that has been going on. A few years ago, I myself, was accosted by, I don't think they were members of the SARS, but they were like, some soldiers, some armed person. And they brutalized the guy who was with me, but somehow I was spared. So the SARS was started, I think, sometimes at the beginning of the 2000s, because there were a lot of crime, especially kidnappings. So again, the symptom of a system that is in panic. There is a lot of poverty and unemployment. Young people graduate from university and they just wasted their time, because then they start riding Okada, bikes that are motorcycles that are like for transportation, or picking garbage, or just doing about anything. So they started doing kidnappings. They would waylay rich people and their families, take them in and ask for ransom through their telephone. So to end that kind of crime, the government set up these ruthless units in their police. So it was like a military police kind of thing. But then they ran wild. They began to, just go to anybody who dresses well, especially young men. If they see you riding a car, they stop you, they strap you, they take your money, and stuff like that. So it went on for so long, and recently somebody got killed, and so people thought this is a time to rise up. And again, don't forget that we're in the middle of a pandemic. If you look at even the US, every little thing people go nuts here because there are lockdowns. Many of the job places have been gutted by the pandemic, by the lockdowns. So poverty and lack hasn't increased even in developed countries like the US. Talk more of Nigeria. So all of that put together just sent these people into this rage, and so a lot of protests broke out all over the country. It began in Lagos, but then it spread widely. And eventually, as you would expect, those who hold power try to put it down the way they always do for any kind of protest in Nigeria, whether it's for governance or to end corruption, or against fuel hikes, unexplained hikes that bring a lot of hardship to people. So they brought it down brutally, killed quite a number of people, and now, it's over because I think people often will come to an awareness that, look, we are just going to kill ourselves. Things will not change. These people have burrowed deep. They've planted their roots so deep that it is almost like a waste of time trying to fight them. So this is where the situation right now.
And how did that feel for you watching it from a distance, in the sense that you are in the US in Nebraska? How did that feel, you seeing your country going through that?
Well, I'm not a US citizen. I do not even want to be necessarily. So Nigeria is my country. I was involved, obviously. It's a painful thing to watch. My cousin was one of those who was protesting. Luckily, she didn't go to Lekki Bridge, where this 7 people were shot dead brutally by the police. But she protested around. She saw some of the brutalities. So watching it, I knew it was going to come to that, because we've seen this a lot of times. Last year, the election, a lot of it was rigged, and people did the same thing. Many of them were jailed. The head of Sahara Reporters, Showore, is still basically under house arrest. So there is a cabal, there's a clique of renegades, as I like to call them, who are not interested in relinquishing power. They want the status quo to continue. It's unfortunate, but I think that there is a ray of hope. In fact, there is. So Nigerians have become these stoic people. I mean, we've always been, but there's a kind of stoicism that we have imbibed that allows us to tolerate just about anything. And I think that if there's any good thing that is coming out of social media explosion and global Twitter sphere, it is that people are learning. People are looking at America. Any little thing, people rise up here. They burn stuff to the ground. And I think that it is incentivizing some people that look, protest and rebellion actually is something that we should be able to do. So I think that the ruling class is going into a kind of they're not as comfortable, I think, as they used to be.
And then what do you think that, as citizens of other countries, especially on the African continent, watching what's going on in most of these Africas, because Congo is also going through its own thing, right? So what do you think our role can be in a world of social media? Is it enough for us to just hashtag, or do you think that there's more that we could do to assist such movements?
Well, it depends on where you are, and again, it depends on the risk involved. This is something that I often would say. I mean, it is true, in fact, that laying down your life, dying for a good cause is a thing. But most of the times, in a situation like Nigeria, I wonder if it's wise, because especially if you know that nothing good will come out of it. So I think that there are other alternatives to changing things. So yeah, hashtag, you can do hashtag. You can, in fact, I think that for Nigeria, and I think this can apply to Congo, or I saw the other day Angola as well. I think the most potent tool that we can have is actually to force the governments of other places to intervene, because within the structure they'll just harm you, they will just hurt you, without any with impunity. The idea that they have a board of inquiry into the death of the 7, it's nothing will come out of it. By next week it's all forgotten. Those people just died for nothing. So, but as I always say to a lot of people, look at Nigeria, for instance. Look at our just pick one sector, the medical sector, is in complete shambles. Nigerian doctors, the moment they graduate, let's say that 1,000 doctors will graduate from across Nigerian universities this year. By next year, a year from now, 500, half of them is gone. You see what I'm saying? So by the year following, maybe 100 or so, or 150 are left. You see what I'm saying? So you go to hospitals, there's like 1 or 2 doctors, you know. So our people are dying. They can't. They are our professionals are treating Americans, they're treating British people, while our people are dying and all that. So, but why is it so? The reason is because if any of our politicians, including Nigeria's president, is sick, you know, even the other day, just neck pain, his wife that very morning flew to London. So tell me, what is the incentive to build any hospital there or anything like they are not interested. So already they don't care. The idea that we are here to serve others is an alien concept to Nigerian politicians. So but if there is a
okay, some people have, can you hear me?
Yeah,
I think there was an interruption. So I just want to give a disclaimer. We are experiencing a little bit of a storm, so you might hear thunder during our conversation.
Okay.
And I just want to go back to the matter of the day. Thank you once again for joining us. We've had the pleasure of reading your debut novel, which is The Fisherman, and your sophomore novel is An Orchestra of Minorities. Both your books were shortlisted and longlisted for the Booker Prize. And I just wanted to find out from an author who was giving the first offering of a book to the public, right, for consumption, having it being a Man Booker Prize finalist, how did that feel for you? And then having your second book have the same status?
Well, it was good. I mean, it felt good, obviously. It means that a lot of people will read the book. Yeah. And it did. The Fisherman has been, you know, it's been wildly successful. It's been published in more than 35 countries, in more than 30 languages. So, and I think that I owe most of that to the visibility that the Booker Prize and other prizes, you know, gave it. So I mean, it's a big thing, I think. This year, for instance, there are 2 Africans on the list, I think. So, you know, if you ask them, they're going to tell you that it's a revolutionary thing for the career of any writer, because it's the most prestigious prize, literary prize in the world. I mean, for a single book, the Nobel Prize is for a whole career. Yeah, especially if you win, then you know it's even greater. So yeah, they were definitive to my career, I have to say.
And thinking about the nature of this book, right? While I was reading through it, I felt a sense of, from the start. So I'm one person who doesn't want to read too much about the book before I open it. So the way that our book club works is that people suggest books and then we read from that, right? This book was suggested by one of the lit authors, actually, that we had a few months ago. It's Ikau Duke. I don't know if you've heard of him or read any of
Yeah.
So he suggested that we try and read, because I asked him for recommendations, which I will also ask you at the end, and he recommended The Fisherman, and the people in the book club voted for it as well. So that's how it landed on our laps. And while reading this book, I got a sense of something terrible about to happen every single time I turned the page. And I think that it was more intense because it was being told from the point of view of a young boy, right? And what could be as dreadful that a 9-year-old would experience to that extent that would shatter his reality and his family? And as I read, like I'm saying, that suspense kept going on and on and on. But one question that I wanted to ask is, why the link to the animals that you linked the characters to? So every time that Ben was describing the characters, he associated them with some form of animal.
Well, so I think that one of the most interesting things about writing fiction is that you could basically do anything, you know. So it's a form that yields itself to a lot of moldability and invention. So I thought that I would find a new way to tell this story. At its heart, you could say that The Fisherman is an archetypal story. It's about, or maybe not archetypal, but it is at least, in some sense, a story that has been told before. You know, there's equivalences to Cain and Abel dynamics in history or in the biblical sense. So then I thought, okay, if this is a young child who is telling this story, telling it from, you know, when he's in the moment, when he's just 10 years old, but also when he's older, two decades removed from the events, then how would I tell it in a fresh way? And I thought, okay, as a child, I understood things by associating them with other things that I knew better of. So, for instance, if I wanted to describe the guy I fought with, you know, as a 10-year-old at school who was bigger than me, I probably would say that he was Robocop or Superman, you know, something like that, you know, because I understand that comic word better, and that helped me understand the phenomenon of this big guy. So that's what Ben does. You know, he loves animals, and then to be able to understand the reason why his dad has to leave home all the time. For instance, he associates him with an eagle, so it makes sense to him. The eagle goes out to hunt for food. This is the role that my dad also plays.
Okay, I hear you. And then for me, talking about the dad having to leave, right? I felt like there was a strong commentary with what happens in households that are left without the traditional head of the family, right? Where the mother now finds herself having to fend and raise these children by their own. Not that the father has left the family altogether, but like you're saying, has migrated elsewhere to form a better livelihood for his family. And I struggled with placing the blame of the change in their lives on Abulu alone. I also wanted, a part of me really wanted to say, could this man not take his family with him? I understand that there was turmoil where he was going, or could there have not been in any other form to make sure that this woman who had 6 children was not left alone to fend for all 6? I don't know if there was a commentary there about the mother being left to be the head and to some extent the provider as well for the times that the father was away and couldn't bring in whatever he needed to bring.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think that if there is anything that in this novel, I mean, being a first novel, most of the times we are in, you know, we're looking in, we are doing some kind of introspection as as writers when we are trying to put out the first book. So it was, in some ways, looking back at my own childhood, and so this is the aspect of the novel that one could say was inspired by real life experiences. So my dad, like the father of the boys, was a banker, and a federal banker, and he was moved around a lot. So he was always away, you see. So yes, and you know, I could sense at the time that this is one of the demands that a modern life, a modern structure of family puts on you. You see, he has a good job. He's not going to just throw it away. You know, there's a possibility that he may not get any other one that is as lucrative. So those compromises are made all the time, but in real life, you know, and the consequences are real, as you see. So I think you're right in the sense that the mother is trained, you know, from the beginning, and she does warn. She says at the beginning, you know, if you leave, what am I going to do? I don't have like 7 hands, you know, even if I had, or 7 eyes, even if I had all those things, how am I going to be able to cope with all of this, given the, you know, the insane demand that the little children places on me, you know, and so in some ways you could argue that what becomes of the family is a consequence of that compromise.
Okay, so obviously then that spiraled into other actions, and I felt that that was also a well put together theme in the book that your actions have consequences, that constantly you are faced with choices. You either choose to go this way, you either choose to go that way. And I felt that was very blatant in the choice of what Ikena, is it Ikena? Is that how you pronounce his name? How Ikena decided to respond to Abulu's prophecy, right? He could have chosen to ignore the part that he couldn't hear and not force his brothers to tell him what he didn't hear. Or he could have chosen to say, okay, fine. He said a fisherman will kill me. It could have been any fisherman. It could have been in 20 years to come, etc., etc. But he made a choice to believe that it was the people that he was with that would betray him. And for me, there's like this constant theme, like I'm saying, of having been presented with a circumstance and making a choice and it rippling into different things throughout the book. And I wonder if that is a commentary on human existence as well, that at any given point, obviously our actions have consequences, but we have a choice to choose and to see whether or not we're going to take this way or that way, and whatever way we take has a ripple effect. And in this instance, it is a devastating ripple effect.
No, you're right. It's eloquently put. I think that there are a lot of choices that we make, but sometimes those choices can come under certain kinds of duress or pressures. I think that there's quite a number of factors that come to play the moment the prophecy is received. So the prophecy is received in a particular way. So number one, just as the rumors go, there is a mythology around Abulu. He's a madman, but he's also one gifted with these prescient powers. He can see the future, and one could dismiss him were it not for evidences of past prophecies actually coming true. So there's a mythology around him, and a lot of people fear him already. So the boys are aware of that, albeit, because of their youth, they don't believe at any point that they will encounter, him and in a very serious way. But when it happens, in that moment, Ikenna is struck by something, because once the first time they see him, they dismiss him. In fact, they try to rattle him. They're like, what is this guy just walking around naked and whatnot? But then he calls his name. And the moment that happens, something happens to Ikenna that is like the whole force of fear comes upon him in that moment. Why did he call my name? He wonders. Like, nobody has mentioned my name. This guy pronounced, how did he know it? And he can't let go of the fact that a guy he's never had any rapport with knows his name and who he is. So in that sense, I don't think that you can emphasize how fearful that can be if you already believe that this guy has this potent power. So I think most of what happens, what clouds judgment is that fear, and so he breaks out from the group of fishermen, so to speak, but then so the Solomon and the other neighbors go away, so the ones that are left, he withdraws from the war totally, even from his siblings, but the ones that are left are still, so-called threats to him. So once he has pushed away those other so-called fishermen, they are no longer a threat, but he has to grapple with his brothers, so, and every day he wakes up, who is closest to me, who can do this to me? So he begins to judge them, and anything he sees that, feels like any kind of grievance against him or any attack on his person, he reads meaning into it. So in some ways, the prophecy assumes a new dimension of potency.
And it consumes him, right, like a cancer, because for me at the start of the book, what I could sense of this family is that it was very close-knit, that these brothers really, really loved one another, and it became quite troublesome for me to understand how Ikena could believe that his brothers would do that to him. And I think his mother articulates that at some point, that these are your brothers. There's a point where he throws up, or he goes through something, but he's throwing up, and one of his brothers, Boja, cleans up after him. And the mother is insisting that, come and see, this person that you think is going to kill you is actually cleaning up your vomit. How is that even possible? And I also think that there was a good link then with the age as well, because as a child of that age, I can't believe anybody. I don't think you even entertain possibilities of dying, right? You don't know what death is. So for somebody to come into your life before you've thought about death, to tell you that you're gonna die, and that you're gonna die a brutal death at it, and being told in such a brutal way, I think maybe led to him being consumed by this whole prophecy. But I also wondered if there was, okay, obviously there's a lot of commentary here, but I'm wondering if my take on it makes any sense, in the sense that there's been this whole wave, especially in the Christian world, right, of prophets. And for me, it speaks also to the human desire to know beyond the present, right? We can't be content with just knowing this, because I think the town's obsession with Abolu, as much as he was a madman, etc., is the fact that he could see things that no one else could see. And I think that's why they never wanted him to be put away, as in the cops, etc., because in some instances he could help out in certain instances, in crimes, etc. But I wonder if we as human beings would be content with today and right now, and not want to know, when will I die, what will happen tomorrow, not go after false prophets or real prophets, and want to know all of these things, if instances like this would not happen. Because I do believe, even in real life, that people do get consumed by whatever prophecy that they hear about their lives. And as such, I think their life turns in a sense, right? Even if it wasn't headed that direction, because somebody that they believe has the power to prophesy says this, suddenly their life does take that way. And I wonder if you were talking to that at all in this.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And, so what I wanted to do with the book, when I conceived of the idea, was I wanted to explore siblinghood and brotherhood, that bond, the consanguinity, the idea that by virtue of having the same blood flowing in you and someone else, you love them, because I had gone to university from home for the first time, and on getting there, so I come from a family of like a lot of siblings, so there are 12 of us right now, but so I have younger siblings who came on later on, but while growing up, we're always at least 7 or 8, quite a crowd, and so on leaving, for college, I discovered something that actually really surprised me. At that time, I didn't have a friend, and all my classmates, they were like talking about all the time. They talk about their friends in Lagos, in Port Harcourt and whatnot, and and it just struck me that because of how many siblings I had, we could do everything together. There's a guy who likes literature. There's the one who likes, sports. There's the sister who is like a Christian, all kinds of stuff that you want to do, So it just occurred to me that for a long time, I did not even think of having a friend. So I began to think of how, while with them, I took them for granted. I did not know that I actually loved them that deeply. But once I was away, it became this thing that, really consumed me. So I said, okay, I would explore what it means to love your brother or sister, and then the obverse of that. So what can destroy that, bond? And I came up with a lot of ideas, and eventually I settled on the idea of prophecy, because it's something that is prevalent in Nigerian society, especially in the church, So then the question for me is the prophet itself by potency, or does it have potency by being spoken, or every time that it is fulfilled, is it in fact us who bring it to pass. Given that a lot of people believe in this thing called the prophecy in the Nigerian worldview. So that's one of the things, because if you look at the novel, the prophecy does in fact come to pass. So there's a moment quite before that when the boys, the brothers, Obembe, Boja, and Benjamin are trying to get their brother back from wherever he has gone to, and they're coming back from church, and for the first time he speaks to them. They look into his face. This thing has consumed him, and they tell him, look, we love you. How can we kill you? You see the thing, like, you are our brother. We always loved you and whatnot. And he is at the cups of believing it, but then he thinks again, and then he vanishes. So when it actually happens, in fact, they say to him then that, look, Abulu is a stupid guy. He doesn't even know what he's talking about. How can he says that there will be a red river? Have you seen a red river before? How can a river be red? But at the point in which the prophecy is supposedly fulfilled, there is actually a kind of a red river, So not to give much away if you haven't read the book, but so then that again reinforces this idea that in fact this guy has power and his prophecies have power.
And then once that prophecy is fulfilled, the heart-wrenching pain that falls upon this family, especially after they find Boja, right? For me, it was, I did not expect what happened to Boja to actually happen, because I was like, this pain is enough, And the father coming back was also a certain pain, because then he had to admit that he should have been here. He should have listened to his wife. He should have found a way, even though he was trying while on the course in Ghana. He should have found a way to come back after the wife had constantly been giving him reports about how difficult it was to raise these boys on her own. And then Boja happens, right? They find him in the state that they find him in. And I'm like, how are we meant to live through this? This just happened. And then now there's this. And I wonder if the sorrow is the thing that, how do I put this, keeps people reading in the book, in the sense that you almost have this thing of, okay, there's a lot of pain here, but hopefully there's at some point there's some appeasement. So you're waiting for the moment that, okay, this will pass. But for me, it seemed like it spiraled into the next thing, which takes me back to the idea of choices having a ripple effect, right? But I wondered why it was necessary for you to tell such a heavy story.
Well, two reasons, but isn't it interesting that you feel that way? So this is one of the interesting things about literature, about fiction. I teach fiction as my day job at the university here, and so I tell you from before you pick up the book that this is make-believe. These characters did not exist. They're not human beings. These are not real situations. But then you read about people who are not in existence and you feel these things. And a lot of people tell me that they cry and whatnot. And so about things that did not exist. So is that not in some ways a kind of a miracle? So yeah. So one thing that I've been trying to do as a matter of principle of composition, if you will, or the philosophy of my work is, I'm interested in that journey, the internal journey, psychological journey that individuals go through, as a result of certain things. So over a spectrum, from one end of the spectrum to the opposite end of it. So how can a brother who loves his brothers, who would, lay down his life for them, in these backstories that they record during the riots in 1993 and whatnot, turn from love to complete hate? So that journey, that inward shift is very interesting for me. I call it a kind of a emotional motility of character over a period of time. In my second book as well, that is what I explore. Chinonso, who at the beginning of the story is this humble poultry farmer who, sacrifices his prized possession. By the end of the novel, he has changed completely. He's like this vindictive guy who is like, who ends up committing murder, in fact. So how does it become that? So that's one thing that I wanted to explore, and one of the reasons why things turn somewhat dark, because at the beginning of the novel, the children are all funny, they have a normal life, then things take that spin. So another thing is because at the heart of the novel is, I'm thinking a lot about the state of Nigeria. These things we talked about at the beginning of this interview. Why is it that, given all the potentials, everything that we have, giant of Africa, numbers and whatnot, and you have me here. I do not want to leave the country. I love my people so much, not the country itself, but the place, the people, the idea of it, its history, its culture, but I am forced to, leave. So in some ways, the novel is an interrogation as to why that happens. So this is at a metaphorical level. You could say that the boys and this family were normal. Their life was going as children's lives would be, until this external force comes in and says to them, this is how your life will be now, and restructures them, forms them into what they were not, in the way that the colonial people did. Nigeria is a figment of the British imagination. It's none of our, none of us created Nigeria. In fact, my grandfather was all through his life, my dad used to say a Nigerian, but he never knew that he was, a Nigerian. Somebody just declared that he was a Nigerian without consulting him, so. And we have to live with the consequence of that every day, perpetually. So this is one of the reasons why, the novel, I think, takes that dark stone. But I think it's also hopeful in the end, because my definition of tragedy is not that things are broken. A car can be completely damaged and then completely remade. It is when they are not repaired again, when it is impossible to be put together, that is when you say that something is tragic. But if it can be remade, and I think the family bounces back, at the end of the story.
And can we talk a little bit about the pressures put on the eldest son, right? The father's parenting style in this book had a sense of, obviously he seemed like a disciplinarian. He seemed like somebody who loved Western education, who wanted certain things, had dreams for his own children. And I wonder if his stance and his parenting style, those dreams as well as the fact that he was a disciplinarian, and having put the pressure that he put on Igena when he left, and he put this as a same kind of pressure on Obembe after Boja passed on, right? If there is that thing of having to have a child lead the pack, and if children really take that too much to heart, and that actually influences how they live.
Yeah, in many ways, yeah. I think it's a Nigerian thing. There's always, but probably universal thing. You can't just have a flat group of people. Somebody will have to be a kind of a leader. I watch the NBA a lot, for instance, or even soccer, football, and at some point somebody will emerge as some kind of leader, even though all of them are equal on the footing. So that dynamic is there. So Ikenna, by virtue of age, takes on that role, and yes, he has a lot of pressure, which is a lot of people have written quite a lot of stuff about this book. It's 5 years old now. And one of the fascinating things that people have said that, I thought made sense was the idea that it is the flogging that actually began to, the way in which he was punished for being the one who led them to the river, is where his problems began. So that's one interpretation that I find, because the book is no longer mine now. That is out in the world. Everybody who reads it, is free to bring their own interpretation, and I love hearing those interpretations.
And you know what? I can understand that, because he did tell them, let's stop going there. They insisted. And by the time that they got caught, he had been repeatedly trying to get them to stop. And I can fully understand that. But let's go back to Obembe, right? After Boja and him taking on this elder brother responsibility, I got the sense that he put some pressure on Benjamin, right, to avenge his brothers, which is not something that had been born in Benjamin's mind, right? Because he was still so very young. He didn't even understand what was what. And not until he was told that perhaps this was the madman's fault did he actually start to piece pieces together and say, you know what, you could be right. It could be his fault. But this obsession, I'll say, of avenging his brothers that got born inside of Obembe's head consumed them again, right? And it all came from the same prophecy, but it consumed them so much so that they started plotting the madman's demise. But my most interesting thing in that, for me, was the choice of weapon. Right? Back to the fishermen and what they decided to do with the weapon, and how, as young as they were carried out this brutal act. Do you think that grief can bring out that kind of strength and complete disregard of how do you call it? I don't want to say morality, but morality in young people?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Without question. I think that because if you look at what they lost, Benjamin says something that I think I remember from the novel, even though I've not read it in a long time. But he until his brother's death, or including, and then Obembe goes away, he had relied on them on everything. He has not thought for himself. He has not tried to understand just any phenomenon by himself, because everybody, the clothes he wore were passed down, everything. So just imagine that all being taken away from you. Like, there is a sense of deep, excruciating loss there that is, that just makes them unable to continue living. So they stop going to school for that term. And so it's a big thing for them. So they are trying to get some kind of closure, which they are obviously not getting from their parents, because those ones are dealing with their own grief as well. So they just sense that actually killing this guy who caused them this problem will be the way, because when Ikenna was alive, he has taken them on expeditions like that. Let us go and behead the chicken of this woman who told on us. Let us get back. So they're trying to do that, what they have learned from their brothers. And at some point during the first fishing expedition, Ikenna had actually suggested that we can hit him with our hook. So in some ways, Ikenna himself almost is a kind of a sudden, unconscious prophet, because what he says is what happens at the end.
Okay, I'm going to open up the floor to whoever's online to ask questions. But before I do that, I'll just wrap up these questions that I have, right? While people ask, I'll just say the rest of the stuff that I wanted to ask around the relationship between Obembe and Benjamin, and the betrayal that I felt was a betrayal at the end, right? When Benjamin said, you know what? Let's go back home. Let's tell our parents what happened, and let's face the music. And having seen this thread of the older brother always taking care of the younger brother, I didn't imagine that Obembe would leave him, right? And say, as young as you are, you go deal with it and apologize on my behalf. And I'll see you when it's safer to come back. And also, Benjamin's stance when the whole trial was going on was of somebody older than 10 years old. You know, it felt like he, even though he does say he didn't perceive as much, it felt like he was having an adult moment, if I can put it at that. And having discovered how Abula touched each of their lives, including the father, when he had said he went for a cataract operation, was quite intriguing at the moment. But my heart went out to Benjamin because I felt like eventually he's the only one who took the fall and faced the music. And he was the younger of the clique of boys, right? And I wonder if it was realistic for him to forgive Obembe as much as he did, or was that a commentary on the love that they had?
Yeah, well, in some ways, I think that he has to do it. I mean, again, if you ask me, I don't think that even in the moment when that brutal fight happens, that the brothers hated each other. I think they did it because of other reasons. You know, there is so much fear, there is so much pride, there is anger that somebody you love is doing, you know, is acting these ways towards you. So there are other reasons. So I don't think that there was ever a time when Benjamin did not love his brother, like Obembe. So it was always there, I think, you know, and that would generate obviously forgiveness. So I think it's for me, at least in my thinking, he wants his brother back. So yeah.
Okay. So while we wait, if people do have questions, I'm just gonna continue. Who was your favorite character to write in this book?
No, I don't think there was any single person, to be honest. I think that I tried. I mean, obviously Benjamin is the one we stay with throughout the novel. Yeah, he was interesting to write, to give him that language, you know. And I'll say that he's telling the story two times, but they meld together. There are two places. So he's telling it in the court as that 10-year-old boy, but also he's recollecting at the same time, you know, when he's like in his 30s, when he has two, you know, kids of his own. Yeah, so there's a kind of interaction, an overlap between those two. So sometimes those adult-like wisdom that you get is coming from the older Benjamin, you know.
Yeah. I got the sense of that, and I think that it came together at the very end when he started his testimony in court, similar to how the book starts at the start of the book. Then it made sense that this is something that he was telling us from both perspectives. But you could get a sense of there's no way that a 9-year-old could be thinking this way, you know. So I think that it was very well done. It flowed very well together. And how long did it take you to put this together?
Well, quite some time, probably 4 years, from conception, obviously, to the final book being published. So I, in essence, began writing in 2009, late 2009. I took about a year off or so, and completed it in 2012, thereabout. And so it was sold to publishers in early 2013, but we had some delays, so it was published early 2015. So I mean, it was a journey, actually.
Yeah. And tell me, what are your personal remedies to overcome? Like I'm saying, this is a heavy story, right? To overcome these stories when you have put them aside, right? Because there's a lot of death in the story. Let's be honest. Like there's a whole lot of death, and I don't think that a regular person handles that, and especially brutal death, to that extent in their lifetime. So when you have to imagine this and put it on paper and then have to, in a way, obviously forget it, cleanse yourself of it after it's done, how do you go through that?
for me as a writer, I don't know. I'm just looking at the entire story at at this as a concept, and I'm also looking at the characters and as individuals. I'm wondering, is it entirely possible that somebody could go through these things? And I think that in fact it is possible if you think about it. Quite a number of people have told me that they've heard stories like this before. In fact, a guy in Florida in the US here told me that he knew someone who had a similar thing. She had this marriage, everybody thought was good, and until they went to this tea leaf reader who told her, look, you're going to get a divorce, it's in your future. And she came back and it consumed her. And one day, so every time she would tell her husband, and the man would just be like, that's nonsense, you don't believe these things. But all the time, whenever they fight, she would be like, see, it's coming, it's coming, it's coming, it's coming, it's coming. Until one day the guy got tired, and left. So this is an instantiation of the fisherman in real life in the US.
Yeah. Okay, there is a comment here from Snovoyo, just a comment on the style of writing, the suspense, spot on. It's no wonder the book was shortlisted. And that's what I'm saying, right? From the beginning, there's this pull into the book that wants you to keep reading, because there's this sense of foreboding that's coming, right? But like I'm saying, at some point though, in your heart, you're hoping, okay, I hope it ends well. I really hope it ends well, even though I know something bad is going to come. And she's absolutely right. The style of writing. And for me, I always say that books can be brilliant and still be accessible, right? Because I think the point of a writer is to be read. And if your book is not accessible, then it's difficult for even us to have this kind of conversation, because I have to sit here and try and grapple with what were you trying to do or what were you trying to say. And I think that you've balanced that very well in this book, like what Snovi is saying. That's why I think a lot of people have enjoyed it and could relate to this. And I think centering it on a familial love story was that was gonna grab everyone at any point.
Yeah, a familiar and universal love story.
Yes. Okay, thank you so much for your time, Chigozie. I really appreciate you coming on here. And all the best. Are we expecting anything from you in the future?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I have to keep writing. It's something that I have to do. I can't not do it,
Yeah. And so, like I said, we would ask for recommendations. Please, can you share with us like 3 books that you think that we have to read? Yes.
Did they have to be African literature?
Yes, please. But if you want to add some book that has impacted you that isn't African, then you could add that at the end. But definitely give us African recommendations.
Well, I just reviewed this book for the New York Times, and is by a Senegalese French guy. It's called At Night All Blood is Black. So I think it's a great book. It's set in the trenches of the Second World War. Francophone African soldiers fighting for the French. Wonderfully done. Told by somebody who is crazy. So the voice is truly powerful. I have also I liked recently an African book that I've read. So Chika Unigwe's short story collection, Better Late Than Never, I think. It's also good. But also, I also appreciate, more like older writers now. I really like Arrow of God by Chinua Achebe. And I don't know if you have read any of his work, but it's a book that I return to again and again because of its the way in which it writes. It brings and constructs this civilization that is now lost. Authentic African Igbo civilization, how people were living in pre-colonial times. I think that it does a great job of realizing that on the page.
And those are important. I think those are important stories for African discovery in people who have grown up in a very westernized African society, right?
Yeah.
So you need to go back to those in order for you to be able to remember, even if you didn't live through them. I think those are definitely important stories.
Yeah.
And did you have a non-African book that you wanted to recommend?
Not really, actually. Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking, because I mean, I've been reading quite a bit of stuff. I blob books. I get books from publishers all the time to blob. Yeah, and
what's your blog called?
Say again.
What's your blog called? Where can people find your blog?
My blog.
Yes.
No, I said I blob. Like when you write.
Blog. Okay. I thought you said blog.
No, like something like this.
Yes.
Yeah, the back of the book. Yeah, so I think the one I did most recently is a book coming out next year called it's by Simon Van Buyo. Yeah, it's a great book. I've forgotten the title now, but it's an American book. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you once again, and all the best with the rest of your work. We'll look forward to book number 3 very soon, hopefully.
Yes, thank you, Vuvu. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Bye.